Hello and welcome to another episode of Birth of a New Dimension. I am Aurora. I am also a flying rainbow lasagna. I said a flying rainbow lasagna. This implies that there are others or potential others. So I have said this many times that the flying rainbow lasagna is like open source code for one's DNA. Open source code such as Ubuntu, the free open source platform for your computer. The idea being that in the open source community, sharing of information makes a community stronger as opposed to keeping proprietary information, which in essence weakens the entire group or weakens the entire ecosystem. So, I could jump off into so many different tangents on that one. We could bring in the work of Bruce Lipton, an excellent scientist who is a scientist with heart, and he understands biology and epigenetics in a way that is helping to give people greater freedom as opposed to lock them into a sense of fatalism and being destined to achieve certain diseases. So again, if you do YouTube, I recommend the work of Bruce Lipton. And the tangent, what brought him up is this idea of competition versus cooperation. So I'm going to dive right in. Competition is, so the survival of the fittest. Competition is a basis of the concept of survival of the fittest, which is taught as one of the basic tenets of current scientific understanding of the world, which includes evolutionary biology. I like Bruce Lipton because he is an evolutionary biologist, but he is throwing the idea of competition right out the window. And my understanding of all of this is that the idea of evolution came from Charles Darwin, and it came out of the Victorian era. And Victorian ideals are heavily judgmental. They are also involved a lot with the teachings and the doctrines of the Christian church. And there's a lot in there about suffering and reward, and that if you have worked hard, you have earned what you have, and that clearly, if you are poor or if you don't have something, it's because you didn't work hard. And that justification led to a great deal of social iniquity. It didn't take into account anything such as birth circumstance or circumstances that might be out of a particular person's control. And you can see how, that is a not progressive attitude or viewpoint. One may see how applying that non-progressive attitude towards the biological realm can be quite distortive. So with the Victorian eyes of his era, Darwin looked at the world and he saw organisms that he thought were fighting against one another for survival. He saw organisms that were fighting for supremacy. So to use the example, plants in a meadow, Darwin saw as all fighting for the same resources. Everybody wants the same sun. Nobody wants to live in the shadow. All of the roots want all of the available nutrients, and nobody wants to share. Bruce Lipton blows that out of the water by showing scientifically that, for example, plants in a meadow are all working together for their mutual success. Far from a fight for survival where only the strong shall survive, plants actually help each other out. They not only transfer information through their root system, like they will say one area of the meadow might communicate to another area of the meadow, it is dry over here, and the other area might say, we have plenty of moisture over here. They also transport nutrients along their roots. There's an amazing interconnectivity between plants helping one another. And when we perceive plants in a forest, and science of the Darwin-flavored, fight for survival science looks at it and says, the taller trees and taller plants are trying to shade the other plants and fighting for the sunlight. Far from it, the plants are constantly moving in a dance that allows the maximum amount of light to reach the maximum amount of surface area of the various leaves of the various species. Hold on one moment while I just take a sip of tea. Cool and rainy day up here in Northern California. Feels nice to drink a cup of tea, and I know that the weather is cooling all throughout. So that brief tangent aside, it is a good segue into the idea of partnership, divine partnership, and we could call it brotherhood, or we could say a sense of familial closeness with hyperspace beings. Hyperspace I would define as the space outside of space, and I would define space as the third dimension. So if you are a regular listener to this Birth of a New Dimension radio show, you hopefully caught the episode where I talked about how to build the dimensions. We're talking here about how to understand higher dimensional space from the viewpoint of a third dimensional being submerged in the fourth dimension. So the third dimension, this is the box. We live inside of a box. We have a box-like structure, and we are moving from boxcar to boxcar, moment to moment, experiencing the flow of time. Hyperspace beings exist above the fourth dimension. They are certainly interactive with the fourth dimension and the first, second, and third dimension, but they also exist above. And this gives them many greater degrees of freedom, because perhaps those of you who have listened in or are familiar with my work will sing along, adding an additional degree of freedom. Pardon me. Let me begin that song again. Adding an additional dimension means adding an additional degree of freedom. So every dimension that one goes higher in the multidimensional structure of the universe, one achieves a greater degree of freedom. And when we think freedom, think movement. Think like latitude and movement. So, for example, an ant has less freedom than a butterfly, because a butterfly may jump off the surface of a flat leaf and fly onto the next leaf, as opposed to an ant which has to crawl. Unless you're a queen ant, will not quibble with things like that, please. Inorganic life, or hyperspace beings, I would define as beings who do not have a third dimensional biological bodysuit, a humanoid or even redwood tree shaped or even cat or dog shaped biological bodysuit. And again, science in this time and place as it currently stands is slow to recognize these other non-corporeal entities. It is a huge challenge because it has to do with consciousness. So often in these radio broadcasts and in other recorded materials that I do, and when I present my live webinars, which I do each Wednesday night, and I hope that you will join me. We are actually at the end of a cycle. So first of all, the webinar series, it is Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. Homework is a 1-hour recorded lesson via Edu Creations. This is an interactive whiteboard that I use in order to utilize my artwork as a type of prop, a visual cue and system of language that I can point to and draw diagrams with while you hear my voice. So right now, although it is wonderful to have a radio show and communicate through vibrations of my flapping mouth parts, it's even better when I get to have either a paper and pencil or chalkboard and chalk or virtual whiteboard, and I get to draw these concepts because they are truly concepts that are beyond words. I know that I have spoken about on this radio station before the idea that our human mind, our operating system, is a hacked operating system. That the human mind was not created by humans, was not created for the convenience and ease of use of humans, although it is utilized by humans. And that this human mind, once it is implanted in infancy or early childhood, cuts one off from the source of divine or higher consciousness. And that the trick is to develop connection to the source again by pressing pause on the verbalized written mind, and also to develop communication that goes beyond verbalized conscious thought. And this communication can be in the form of artwork, sculpture, animations, light shows, music, dance, things that are different forms of communication that can hold a syntax and a structure and a pattern, but which are not necessarily linguistic in the sense that English or Japanese or North Korean are language structures. And the answer is because all of those language structures that were created by otherworldly beings and foisted off on humanity have been used as limiting factors to prevent humanity from reaching one's highest potential. Guess what, guys? This is remembered in the cultural myth of the Tower of Babel. I am not a biblical literalist at all, and it is necessary to approach the writings of the Bible and the channeled writings of the Torah, with the proper amount of not only skepticism but historical context. One must understand the context in which a document or piece of artwork or expression was created in order to better understand that expression. All of that being said, the story of the Tower of Babel is that humanity was working together to build a citadel that was so high that it, quote unquote, threatened God. And God became petty, angry, and jealous and decided not only to break the tower, to cast all of the humans down, but to create language confusion, so that now humanity could no longer work together and build a high edifice to the sheer effrontery of God. Well, first of all, it seems quite ridiculous, this reading of God, some kind of hyperspace being that is so insecure that it would be threatened by anybody else achieving its level, as opposed to what we know true divinity to be, or I cannot speak for you. What I know true divinity to be is about unconditional love and equality. That unconditional love is based in equality. I know I've spoken on this radio show before about unconditional love, far from being an airy-fairy, new-aged hippie ideal, is actually a tone. And there's a wonderful scientist who has been able to measure this tone. He created a whole machine out of it. It's another person I direct your attention towards their work because it's quite worthwhile. This person's name is Dan Winters, and he has created a machine that measures the cohesive waves that are emitted from the electrical activity of your heart while it's beating. And he does very beautiful, informative, investigative research into the 7 layers of cardiac muscle, the way that they are arranged on the heart's axis, and about how when those 7 layers pump in a harmonious fashion, that they actually create harmonics that create a stronger heartbeat. So what doctors measure right now is quite simplistic, just in the sense of how many beats you have per minute, and they are not necessarily measuring the harmonics of those beats. One moment, please, while I pause my recording. So Dan Winters has created this machine that measures the harmonics of your heartbeat. And the idea is that the more coherent the wave structure is, and when I say coherent, in terms of light or any other type of wave, coherent waves means that all of the peaks, all of the troughs match up. All of the ups and all of the downs match up. So laser light is coherent light. Instead of beams flying all this way, that way, willy-nilly, it's like when you have shuffled the cards and then you have arranged them back into a nice, lovely order. All of the light beams go up, then all the light beams go down, then all the light beams go up, and this is what prevents a laser light from being dispersed. Well, this is the same exact thing with one's light body, with one's non-physical light presence. This is tricky because when I speak about light, I am not just talking about the visible light spectrum. I'm not just talking about the light that is emitted from a light bulb or from the sun, because each one of us has a light body that we reside within. Your physical structure of your physical body is currently sitting within an enormous ball of light. However, it is not light that is perceived by your physical eyeballs. It is light that is perceived by your non-physical eyeball, and that's called your third eye, also called your indigo or brow chakra. And this anatomy of spirit or light body is analogous to the gland at the center of your head that is the pineal gland. Dun, dun, dun. Let's get into that little pineal gland talk here. So the pineal gland is a fascinating aspect of the human biology because it is shaped very much like a physical eyeball, the physical eye that you have in the front of your face, except it does not contain an aperture through which light can enter it. How odd that there would be an apparatus for sensing light buried deep within the center of one's brain, far from any light. It's in the darkest reach of your skull, and that it would not have any exterior opening that would allow light to enter into it. Yet this structure contains retinal cells, which are stimulated by the presence of light. How very, very strange. What a miraculous body we are in possession of. Well, it turns out that the pineal gland is stimulated by light, but the light is the light of direct thought or direct consciousness. I like to call the pineal gland your inner movie screen. So if I ask you to imagine anything, like please imagine a blue feather. That blue feather that you just envisioned has been created on the retina of your pineal gland, and the cells of that gland were stimulated directly by neural impulses from other places in your body, and you did that at will at my prompting. Like I requested, notice that I said please, and you complied. So also this gets into a lot of things about free will, because I'm a walk-in. Dun dun. If you are new to my radio broadcast and you are new to who I am and what I am, first of all, I invite you to visit flyingrainbowlasagna.com, where you can find out all about what Aurora is and what the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is. But to synopsize, I am not the original inhabitant of this body. I came into this body when it was 27 years old in human Earth chronology, and the event that precipitated this was the biological death of the previous occupant. That literally they died, and there was neurological damage, and there's a long story about what actually caused it. And if you are truly interested in delving rather than me reiterating in this radio broadcast, please check out on my YouTube channel, which is called Channel Flying Rainbow Lasagna. It's a video called Aurora's Story Walking In, and there's part 1 and part 2. It's quite extensive, and it talks all about it. And I think it would be informative of you if you were informative to you of my story if you were interested in learning the backstory of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna in order to inform you of the significance of its sudden creation here in this realm. But basically, I was able to come in and occupy this physical form after the original occupant left because of a force field of grace that held the cellular structure together instead of having it die, lose vitality and die off into a pile of goo. And the portal through which I came into this body is called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, and it is a hyperspace torus. Torus, T-O-R-U-S, is a donut shape. And I'm happy to see that science and alternative science is now coming to understand the beauty and significance and profundity of the shape of the torus. The torus or donut shape is the shape of your non-physical energy field. The light body that I was speaking about earlier that surrounds you, it's shaped like a big giant donut, and you sit inside of it. And the central core of it and the densest part of it is your physical body. But emanating out from there, you have differing layers of dense energy, going from the denser realm of your physical form and going to the less dense realm. I will read them off. Your physical body, then less dense than that is your emotional body, associated with the color of orange and with the area below the navel and the area of mammalian feelings. Less dense from there is the level of yellow, the intellect, the conscious mind, the hacked operating system that is called, quote unquote, the human mind. Less dense from there is the level of unconditional love. And that is the coherent field that Dan Winter's machine is able to measure. So that was a beautiful segue into science with heart, science beginning to understand that there is a non-physical realm. So there's light that is part of the electromagnetic phenomenon, the spectrum that we perceive with our physical eyes. And then there is all of the light that we perceive with our non-physical eye. And out from green, there's the level of communication. This is light blue associated with the throat chakra, and outward from there, insight associated with the indigo chakra, and outward from there, one's divine connection or the connection to the source. Violet, the chakra where you quote unquote plug into the universe. So these chakras and their colors are perceived with one's inner vision. And one perceives using the gland of the pineal gland and also the vortex of the insight or inner vision chakra, which is your Christ consciousness chakra and is located on the forehead of your body. So, okay, Christ consciousness, I know that I have spoken about this in previous lessons, that is not necessarily associated with the religion that has taken the name of Christ and Christianity. That Christ consciousness is a neutral entity that exists in the universe, and one does not have to be a particular religion or have a particular belief system to be a part of Christ consciousness. In fact, I would like all of us to understand on a deep level that Christ is synonymous with consciousness. Any place where you look around and you see consciousness, and there is a lot of it, you are seeing Christ. All right, now we're starting to get the idea of it here. So for example, there is Christ in the stars. There is Christ in the black hole at the center of the galaxy. There is Christ at the center of every atom, in the strong and weak force of the nuclear atom. Like there is Christ in the probiotics that break down the food in one's small intestine so that one might, achieve nourishment in this physical body. Any place where there is the tiniest spark of consciousness, that is Christ. There's Christ in a dung beetle. There's Christ in a pile of dung. This must be understood. There's Christ in every single yeast that lives on the surface of your skin and every single mite that lives at the base of your eyelashes. All of those living beings have consciousness. Now let's also talk about beings that do not fall within the definition of science in terms of living. Mites that live on your eyelashes have physical bodies, and they eat and they reproduce and they have a whole life on your eyelashes. Quite amazing, right? There are non-physical beings that have a whole world and a whole life, but they do not exist at this level of density. And the rules for their existence are also different. So these are hyperspace beings, okay? And the reason why I talk about divine co-creative partnership is that when the two aspects are separated, when the physical, earthly, corporeal, mundane self is separated from the hyperspace / angelic / light body / pure energy self, what that means is that the being who has all of the information and all of the exalted perspective, the higher perspective, that being is not powerful in layers of lower density where, we really need to get stuff done. This has been the human condition for about the past 10 or 20,000 years. And so in my weekly series of Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, I'm just getting up on lesson 18. That's why the cycle is almost over. It's a 20 lesson cycle, and we're just about to start again. I probably will begin in January. So I reserve this information for lesson 18 because I feel that it is not a good idea to overwhelm a person in the beginning with very heavy concepts that might be subject to a lot of judgment, a lot of ideas of victimization, topics that touch on buttons or that are like triggers for abuse. And when I say abuse, not just within one's present corporeal lifetime, but abuse that goes all the way back to, let's say, ancient Atlantis, planetary abuse of the creative potential within each one of us and within the planetary structure and planetary mind herself. That there has been a great deal of iniquity in history. And in a lot of ways, humans right now and human culture right now has amnesia, and the amnesia is to block out the unpleasantness. In much the same way that a person who has been raped or abused or tortured might use amnesia to block the rawness of the experience in order to move forward from it and build a new identity. Well, this is what humanity has done, okay? Humanity recognizes history, the story of itself, his story of about the past 5,000 years. However, humans have existed on the face of Earth for much longer than 5,000 years, and even traditional science recognizes that. We can get into all sorts of wonderful alternative archaeologists who are showing traditional science that their timeline of human events is far off, that the scale is far off. So if you're not currently familiar with Graham Hancock, I highly recommend his work. He has done not necessarily his fiction work, but his non-fiction work. I highly recommend you delve into that stuff. He's done good work with redating the Sphinx and some of the larger ancient megalithic stone structures on the face of the planet, being able to show that human culture in deep antiquity was far more sophisticated than present archaeology will give it credit for. So, and there's a reason for that. You know, present archaeology is created by people who have a deep and abiding belief in the Bible. And this is the problem with having that deep belief, that it often limits one's capacity to investigate the world and take in new information. And when I say belief in the Bible, I'm not just talking about Christians, I'm also speaking about Jews and Muslims. That the Trinity, the three, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that all of these religions have a vested interest in the belief that humanity has only been in sophisticated culture for the past 5,000 years, and that prior to that era, humanity did not have what we would call a level of sophistication enough to be defined as having culture, And there is a lot of archaeological evidence that refutes that, and that shows that sophisticated human culture on the surface of planet Earth goes back far beyond the 5,000-year era that current science recognizes. Just drinking a little sip of my tea here. So we have a lot of things here. I've brought up the idea that any god from the sky that would be threatened by humanity working together and creating a project that would bring humanity to higher levels as a capricious, petty, non-universal god. Clearly, that the god of the story of Tower of Babel is not what I and many others would define as the actions of a being who is existing in unity consciousness. Unity consciousness would never be threatened by the presence of itself. It would celebrate the presence of itself. If you knocked on the door of unity consciousness and said, knock, 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 may I come in? Unity consciousness would say, please come in. Why are you knocking? You're a piece of myself. And this is our journey. This is the journey. We came from the source. Science would equate source with the tiny kernel of all matter and energy that existed prior to the Big Bang. I would say source is beyond that definition because it also contains every possibility, every probability, and all consciousness. So beyond, even if you took all of if you scraped together all of the matter of the currently expanding universe and, corralled together all the energy of the world and stuck it together in a bucket, you still wouldn't have everything. You have to still get together all of the consciousness that exists here in this place and get that all together. So I'm challenging science here in this broadcast. Science, you recognize time and space as dimensions. I'm challenging you to recognize consciousness as a dimension or as a force or as a substance or as a particle. Recognize consciousness as a player here in the experience. Okay, drinking a little bit more tea. The Earth culture and human culture is older than humans currently want to admit to. And humans don't want to admit to their currently debased state either. Currently debased in terms of genetic potential. So your genes have been flattened out. The current, well, not current, but the format of human genes, let's say up to the year 2001, was a diminished and degraded format that minimized the potential of the user to access higher faculties. And when I say higher faculties, I mean unconditional love and above. So unconditional love is a tone, just like a note on my piano or a tone of my voice. When we make that tone when we send energy back and forth. So if you have a partner and you give that partner 2 units of energy and your partner sends back 2 units of energy, you have just created the tone of unconditional love. In the universal sense, when you as consciousness send out your consciousness to the source, and the source sends its consciousness back to you, and all of this is unfettered and exists in a state of pure frictionless bliss, that is called unconditional love. All right? Unconditional love is when you exist in the flow of time and experience without any friction, without any judgment. We must now understand, if you have ever sat in meditation and you have had the experience of observing thoughts of judgment, it now must be understood that that's like observing friction. It's like observing a wheel slowing down because it is running against some gravel. And the gravel is a perturbation in the field. And the field is the non-physical energy field or light body that surrounds and interpenetrates the cellular body. So now we are understanding that this field, this light body, first of all, it is perceptible to higher consciousness. Second of all, it has been imperceptible to people who do not have access to their higher consciousness due to the constant yakking, constant verbalized thought of the implanted, hacked operating system of the human mind. If, since the age of 1 or 2, and you grew a human mind, you've always had your mind going, and you have never stilled your mind and had an experience of true mind, then perhaps you would never know of the existence of higher consciousness or feel the need to acknowledge it in any kind of equation or understanding of the world. And this is very much how many objective materialists live their lives. Turn on the mind button at age 2 or sometimes age 3, and then the mind simply stays on forever. Much like an Apple iPod or iPad, they don't actually have off buttons, they just have pause buttons. This is the human mind. And Steve Jobs didn't put off buttons on a lot of his inventions because he didn't want people to turn them off. And this is the same thing with your mind. Your mind is not your friend. Terence McKenna, brilliant visionary writer and speaker, not on the planet anymore, but you can still connect with his consciousness. You can still connect with his spirit and with his reverberation. But he gave great lectures about how culture is your operating system and culture is not your friend. And this is very true, that you live within this human culture that actually was not created by humans. Human culture was created by non-physical, non-terrestrial beings that have been here utilizing humans and, I want to say, forcing humans to exist in a degraded state for a very long time. So this is that lesson 18 that I was alluding to. It's all about galactic history. It's the thing that the amnesia is blocking out. It's the bad thing. It's the big bad wolf. So, if I may just give you a little bit of an inkling, the bad news is, humans have all of these movies like about getting invaded by aliens and Independence Day and all these different things. The bad news is, humans, you've already all been invaded. You were invaded between 10 and 20,000 years ago, and the invaders have rendered you unable to perceive them. They're still here, and they are the creators, they are the authors of your present misery. If you've ever had a family member affected by cancer, or if you've ever been affected by cancer, guess what? You have been invaded by an alien from another world who is here with the intent to kill you. When you look at how prevalent cancer has become here in this culture and this time and place, if you look at it under those terms, I think, well, humans would run for their guns, be like, let me kill him. But how does one kill an invader that is an invader on that level? An invader on the level of mind, cellular biology, energy structure, social structure, belief system, religion. It is an enemy, or instead of enemy, let us say an adversary or a limiting factor that exists interwoven through every aspect of the world that you see around you. There are aspects of the world that are not tainted by this, and that has to do with the beauty of the biological realm. If you look at trees and nature and clouds that have not been, adulterated again, that have not been changed in any way by humans, then you will begin to connect with this higher consciousness simply because all of the things that humans have been made from a distorted foundation. The very basis of human thought is distorted. The basis of human perception is distorted. So all of the social and cultural and technological outgrowths of those beings are distortions. And that's like saying an organ on the planet is diseased. Because guess what? Humans are manifestors on this planet, and this planet is an amazing cradle for ideas, or like a nursery where ideas are nourished and nurtured and then brought forward into the world. Earth herself has an amazing creative capacity, not just limited to biological reproduction. When we say creative, we don't just mean, you can biologically reproduce a tiny baby version of yourself. We are talking about the idea to incept new ideas. I mean, that's a big one. I paused so that you could swallow it. Really, where do new ideas come from? I have spoken before about the concept of ideas being individuated little pieces of consciousness that are flying around independent of a cellular neurology or biology. So that's a big one. That's a new one for people who are objective materialists and who have been programmed by objective materialism to believe that consciousness arises as a phenomenon out of any sufficiently complex structure. And it could be a neurological structure or an electronic structure, okay? But consciousness can exist independent of a structure. Consciousness can exist independent of a physical, biological structure. So people would call that type of consciousness perhaps spirit, or an energy being, or a light being. A person might call it paranormal, or supernatural, or a ghost. Every culture has stories about deities and non-physical entities, and I'm here to tell you that the non-physical realm is a very real consensual realm. So next week in my Wednesday night class, I am delving into the topic of ayahuasca, DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and cannabis, because DMT and the anandamide of cannabis, these are two naturally occurring endogenous brain chemicals, and they are molecular doorways into a hyperspace reality. That DMT is produced by your pineal gland, the gland I was just talking about as the center of your imagination, the movie screen upon which you envision reality, and then you project it on your interior movie screen, then you experience it projected around you. This is an incredibly powerful realization that if you imagine a blue feather on your interior movie screen, that there is a good likelihood you will then project that into your reality. And this is beautiful. This is the artistic co-creative partnership. And the partner that you are with, you are the corporeal, or I'm currently addressing the corporeal, two-armed, two-legged, two-eared form that listens to physical radio broadcasts, and you also have many other layers of your existence and many other aspects of your consciousness from whom you have been artificially separated and to whom it is necessary to reconnect. And this is the joyful family reunion that we are experiencing. So we are reconnecting with higher self. We are reconnecting with higher consciousness, with non-physical energy presences. And this is concurrent with Earth culture, Earth surface culture, reconnecting with galactic culture. I'm also going to pause for a moment and let that sink in. So no longer will there be this artificial and arbitrary and capricious separation from quote-unquote the lower ego nature and quote-unquote the higher self. There will be a seamless continuum between what the desires of the first-person experiencer of the biological and third-dimensional reality is, and what the short-term, near-term, and long-term agenda of the exalted perspective is. Because if these two aspects of being are working in close partnership, it can lead to perpetual motion machine, essentially an endless journey of consciousness, where one's physical vitality does not have to wane. Your body doesn't have to become decrepit in a mere 100 years, and then your consciousness has to end its continuity and you get a new body and have to learn all of these hard-won lessons all over again. Ha ha ha, the idea is laughable. That's not what we were meant to do. We were meant to come here, and I'm now referring again to the time of Atlantis, the antediluvian worldwide sophisticated culture where people didn't die until they were ready to die. People didn't die accidentally. People did not die of disease. There was not dis-ease. People lived in a perfect state of ease and divine union between the non-physical higher self and the physical corporeal vessel containing the higher self. There was no friction. There were no perturbations in the field. There was a seamless continuum of consciousness. And the genetic degradation that occurred in human history, this capitalized, capital bad thing, like capital B, capital T, bad thing that happened to humanity, after which there is a long period of amnesia, after which humanity is like starting from zero, that the bad thing degraded one's connection to higher self. And I bring this all up in order to tell you that there is now a capital G good thing available. This is the corrective experience. In our experiences, one might have something that is traumatic or injurious. Then there is the corrective experience where the medicine is given, the healing experience is given, and the insight is achieved. Humanity has had a great injury, a great insult, a great trauma, and now it is time for the corrective experience. You've had the slave manacles placed on you. Now it is time for the key that unlocks those manacles. And the key is called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. Amazing. I know, it's a funny name for a really profound and sophisticated tool that you might use like open source code for your DNA to shift your consciousness into a higher dimensional state, and in so doing achieve a concomitant additional degree of freedom. By placing your toroidal energy field of your non-physical form into a higher dimension, you may create a hyper-torus. I call that a flying rainbow lasagna. I call it lasagna because the edge of it is curly, like the curly shape of a lasagna noodle. And it is also very descriptive of what it actually looks like. This flying rainbow lasagna makes it possible for you to get around blockages that were placed in the expression or reading of the genetic code of humanity. So remember, I referred to Bruce Lipton earlier in this episode, that one of the things I really enjoy about his teaching is that he teaches you are not a victim of your DNA. Far from it. The science of epigenetics shows us that although DNA is a code, or like a book, the book of you, there's a higher code, epigenetics, that rules the code of DNA. And epigenetics determines which pages of the book of you are read. Are we going to read the pages where it says, here's how to create a cancerous tumor? Or are we going to read the pages where it says, here's how to dismantle a cancerous tumor and keep the body in a state of total health and vitality? So the capacity to choose which pages of the book of you are being read was lost in large part due to the genetic degradation. Humans were not able to choose, hey, which aspects of my genetic code do I want to create? Now humans are going to be able to choose which aspects of your code you create. And the way that you choose is through your vibration. And vibration has to do with not only wavelength, but also frequency. So let's say with the quality of your energy. And that energy also, that definition of energy also includes the idea of consciousness. So the shape of your non-physical energy field has everything to do with changing into a more vital state. Flying rainbow lasagna is a shape that allows the inner surface and the outer surface to communicate. We haven't cut the fabric of space and time and consciousness. You're not allowed to. They don't make scissors big enough or sharp enough to cut the tapestry that is woven out of space and time and timelines and probabilities. You're not allowed to do that. But with the flying rainbow lasagna, what we do is move and shift those timelines and probabilities and possibilities in a higher dimensional state so that the inner surface and the outer surface can communicate. And what that means is that this artificial dichotomy of the inner world of your thoughts and emotions and pure energy and pure spirit, and the outer world, quote unquote, of the world of seemingly hard-edged objects around us, that there is no longer this distinction between the two realms. In much the same way that a dolphin sleeps its brain one hemisphere at a time and creates a blend of daily waking consciousness and dreaming sleeping consciousness, so too are we experiencing a blending of realities. No longer will the world around us be a very predictable world of hard-edged objects that follow Newtonian physics. And no longer will the interior realm of the dream world be resigned to a flight of fancy, a realm of pure imagination, meaning it's a realm of pure nothingness that can never happen. No, this is the old realm. So now we are moving into a realm that is a flying rainbow lasagna, seamless blend, integration of your inner realm of dreams and imagination and spirit and pure energy, and the outer realm of experience and hard-edged objects and the consensual reality that can be experienced with others. So your dreams will become more real and more vital, and your daily waking experience will become more dreamlike. And eventually, it will not be necessary to make a distinction between these two realms. If I asked you to envision a blue feather in your interior movie screen, on the interior of your pineal gland, and then you left wherever you were listening to this radio broadcast, went for a drive or went to a bookstore or watched something on a screen or on TV, and you saw a blue feather, and if you could make the connection that you projected that into your reality, that is the beginning integument of understanding how two realms can tie together. Imagine first sitting in meditation, creating a Merkaba or a light body vessel, envisioning this star tetrahedron around yourself, going on an interdimensional voyage, and then returning to the world of hardened reality, opening your eyes, stepping out into the physical third dimensional structure, and experiencing what you had just envisioned. I've had the experience. I didn't experience seeing a whole world. I envisioned a chocolate bar. What a strange, arbitrary thing, right? But then I went to a coffee shop later that day and I saw a chocolate bar that had the exact pattern that I had just been meditating upon on its wrapper. And I knew that that was a personal symbol of significance, that it was a symbol of higher consciousness. It is one of those beyond synchronicities because it has to do with literally the creation of an object, that chocolate bar and the creation of its wrapper was influenced by my mind as I sat in meditation. And you can say, Aurora, how can that happen? Because clearly, when you sat in meditation, they did not overnight or instantaneously print a chocolate bar wrapper simply for your personal edification. And I say to you, don't you know that the world of the mind is non-local? It's not limited to time and space. So if at 6 a.m. I sat in meditation and thought about the chocolate bar, and then that thought can travel back in time 2 years, 9 months, 10 years, however many years it is necessary to the printing of the wrapper, so that when I then go to the coffee shop at 9 a.m., the wrapper will be on the shelf there. It's amazing. And when you start to think in terms of time loops, you are now understanding what I'm talking about when I say that adding an additional dimension means adding an additional degree of freedom. That you can become not like an ant, but like a butterfly that can fly from 6 a.m. here in this time and place with your mind to 2 years into the past, to when the chocolate bar wrapper is being printed, and then back to 6:01 a.m. so that you can get up and go see the example of your experiences. This is what it is like to become a multidimensional being, and we are all becoming multidimensional beings because we live on the surface of a planet that is becoming a multidimensional planet. And the planet really has been artificially separated from its full levels of multidimensionality, and that goes back to this history of abuse in far antiquity. But we are now healing that abuse with the corrective experience of now having our wings expand. It was a very hard fall, that fall of consciousness from the heights of sophistication and galactic citizenship in Atlantis to literally, we would say caveman society, but let us say a society where people are suddenly forced to burn things just to keep warm. Like it took society down so many pegs. It was an incredibly traumatic event. And the slow climb upward from that descent has been the story of human culture up to this point. And now it is time to be given back all of the things that were lost in the fall. All of the higher faculties that one was cut off from. There are yogis and masters of the Far East that are able to keep themselves warm even though they live in Tibet in like a Himalayan region where it's very cold. They do it through special breath practices and special energy and concentration practices. And they do it in order to show non-yoga practitioners just a little bit of the possibilities of the human form. With cultivation, things like that are possible to the nth degree. Literally, with cultivation, we can learn how to achieve a tiny microclimate, like a tiny little atmosphere that exists 1/4 of an inch off of the surface of your skin, and that contains all of the heat, warmth, and oxygen that you require in order to live. Like, that's just a little intimation of the type of potential that resides within your human form. When you look around, when you look in the mirror, when you look at human society, I'm sure that you see a lot of people who have health problems, who are unfit, who are out of shape, who have, biological problems. But it's amazing to understand that this human form can also achieve states of vitality and connection to the universe and the energy of the universe that give powers that we would call superhuman. We're getting into the realm of being beyond what was considered human and getting into the level of what I would define as being a full spectrum human, a human who has reclaimed their higher faculties and now exists in a state of total connection to higher consciousness, total health and vitality, frictionless bliss in one's internal mental state. When I was driving home tonight, I was thinking about people in our society who are billionaires and have a lot of money, but who do not have peace of mind, that their interior mental state doesn't feel good, and that no amount of money, there's nothing that they can do with their money to buy something to make their mind feel good, and that is where real wealth comes from. That is the beginning, the genesis, the origin of where real wealth comes from. Well, humans are neurons of the planet. Humans are neurons of the brain and the mind of Gaia, and Gaia herself has been experiencing a great deal of discomfort as the neurons have not been firing properly for about the past 10 or 20,000 years. And it is now time for Gaia to experience what it's like when you have peace of mind, when your mind feels happy and comfortable in its functioning. It is time for the healing and corrective experience of the planet that was oh so unfortunately invaded and horribly abused, and that the creative capacities of this planet were co-opted, were taken away from the planet itself and used towards bad end and to hurt her. And that's just like any heiress or princess that has a rich treasury that's been usurped and then used either on horrible projects or wars that fritter it away, or on oppressing the population at home as opposed to helping, healing, and feeding the population at home. Well, all of that is being turned on its head. Time for me to end this particular broadcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please tune in next week for more of Birth of a New Dimension. Find me on Facebook. I'm first name Flying Rainbow, last name Lasagne, and thank you very much.